Welcome to the Booktopia podcast. I am Sarah McDuling, the Children's Book and YA Category Manager at Booktopia, and I am kind of beside myself with excitement to be talking to the amazing Cressida Cowell. Cressida, thanks for coming on.
Hello, I'm so happy to be talking to you too.
I've been such a huge fan of yours for such a long time and never really thought that I would get to talk to you. So let's see if I can get through my nerves and ask you to just introduce the podcast listeners to Never and Forever Book 4 in your Wizards of Once series.
Yes, I'm Cressida Cowell and I am the writer and the illustrator of the Train Your Dragon books and the Wizards of Once series, and I'm also the UK's current Austen's Children's Laureate. And Wizards of Once and Never and Forever is the fourth in the series, and it's the last. It was meant to be a trio of books. It was meant to be three, actually. I can't remember what the word, trilogy, that's it. It's meant to be a trilogy, but actually it's turned out to be a quartet, and this really is the last in the series. So it's a pretty exciting book because in it there's a big fight between the witches who are trying to get hold. There's two heroes, Wish and Tsar, and they've been trying to get a spell to get rid of witches. But in the meantime, Tsar has unfortunately got a witch stain on his hand, which is taking him to the dark side. And Wish has got this magic that the witches really want to get hold of, which is magic that works on iron. Yeah, and if the witches get hold of that magic, they'll be invincible because they'll be able to fight back against the Iron Warriors, because magic isn't supposed to work on iron. So the stakes are very high. I've put the stakes in this big world to you. It's very high. There's a big fight with the witches, and it's whether or not Wish and Tsar are going to be able to defeat them. And in this book, I do say at the beginning, somebody is going to die at the beginning of the book. I know.
Oh my goodness.
I hope it's not, because the stakes are quite high. But and Squeeze Juice, I put him in terrible trouble. Who's the sweet little hairy fairy? Anyway, so that's what the books are about, and it also tells you one of the things that children have been most interested in. Somebody is narrating this story and you don't know who they are. And this book finally tells you.
It does? It's revealed for real?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Children and adults, actually. Adults. I've been going to the doctor, and the doctor has been saying to me, so who is the narrator? Having adults asking me as well. So you finally find out who the
that's huge. I can't wait.
There's a lot in this book.
At what point when you were writing did you realize it was not going to be a trilogy and that it was going to be a quartet? At what point in the series did you sort of start getting an inkling that it wasn't going to all fit in to three books?
It was about book 2. I knew it wasn't going to be 12 because How to Train Your Dragon was 12 books. But that was a hero going on a journey without realizing it. And this already had a very dynamic story arc. We had to find out whether or not Tsar and Wish were going to be able to bring their parents together. That's another plot point. Whether they could defeat the witches and also who the narrator is. And it would have felt too teasy to go beyond 3 or 4, I think, because that's quite a... because children are growing up on you. Of course they are, So for a child, they might start reading these books when they're 8, and then they're, reading the last one when they're 12. So that's, it would have been felt too teasy to make it any longer. But something happened in book 2, which is that my father died. And that was so in book 2, there's the whole thing about the giant's last breath. And I think that meant, in order to, because I put a lot of personal stuff in my books, the series had to get a bit bigger in order to contain that. And there's a lot in the book about, you know, hearts reforming and rebuilding, and how, you know, loss, you know, you can lose things but then put them together again. Of course, children don't always pick up on this. For them, children, it can just be a sort of moving story about battles, and but, you know, there are some deeper themes in there, and I always like to provide wisdom for children, ways of dealing with things. And so the series had to get bigger for that reason. And also there was a lot of plot, a lot of characters, and it felt it needed that air, if you know what I mean, having another book for that reason.
Well, I mean, I'm now even more desperate to read this book than I was before, but I'm also a little bit heartbroken that it won't be 12 books.
I know. Well, the thing is, though, yes, I know, and I can see that as well, because I feel it. I start writing a world, and I fall in love with the world, and the characters feel real to me. Hiccup and you know, Fish Legs, they all feel real to me, and the same. The same with Wizards of Once. When I started writing it, I thought, how can I ever create a world that I loved as much as How to Train Your Dragon? It was a bit, but then you start writing it and you start falling in love with that. So I understand how it is for a reader as well. But so I haven't ruled out going back into that world and writing another story set in that world. It was just that I felt that particular story had to come to an end. You know, we had to know the answers to whether they'd defeat the witches, or whether, you know, Tsar would get rid of his witch stain, and who the narrator was. I felt we had to, but I could go back into that world and write another story set in that world, because it's a fantastic, and I don't want to give you any spoilers, but there's a big surprise at the end of this book, a huge surprise that I can't say what the surprise is. Because but you can see how that would lead to a completely different, the beginning of a totally different story arc set in that world. But unfortunately, I can't tell
You're kind of killing me a bit. My anticipation can't go higher at this point.
You've got to read the book. So yeah. So I haven't ruled out going back into that world. It's a really fun.
Amazing.
I mean, what kid or adult doesn't secretly wish that they had a magical power? I mean, writing about people who have magical powers, and, you know, Bronze Ages, and it's just such a fantastically rich world to write about. So I haven't ruled out, you know, going back into
That's very exciting to hear. I mean, we usually wait until towards the end of the podcast to ask what's up next for the author, but this question I want to ask you kind of ties into that question. So I wanted to ask what it was like for you at the beginning of this series, after 12 books with How to Train Your Dragon, and what it was like to kind of tackle a new world, and, you know, and then this is where it ties into the what's up next for you. Are you at that spot again now that you're at the end of the semi-end or potential end of this series? Are you in that spot of like creating something new again yet?
Yes, I am.
Ooh.
And it's really interesting. It's simultaneously, it's hugely satisfying to get to the end of a series. I mean, How to Train Your Dragon, 12 books, so many years. I mean, I wrote the first How to Train Your Dragon in 2003. You know, I had little children. Oh my goodness. It could have been How to Train Your Dragon, really could have been How to Train Your Baby. Because I just had a baby. And when I wrote the last How to Train Your Dragon, this is what I'm saying, a lot of autobiography goes into my books. So How to Train Your Dragon is all about being a parent, how to train your baby, and how to be a parent, really. I'm thinking about those things. Because Hiccup is sort of a parent to Toothless, and Stoic is obviously a parent to to hiccup, and I'm working out what kind of a parent do I want to be, you know.
Wow.
And but I'm also kind of trying to tell a story from a child's point of view of how it's about growing up. You know, all my books are about growing up. You know, what kind of an adult do they want to be? And so it was very emotional for me ending that book, The Last How to Train Your Dragon, because it started when I had a baby, just had a baby, and ended with my baby leaving home. Yeah,
oh, wow. What a journey.
It was a big journey. And it's so very satisfying because I'd written the ending so ahead. And it is the same with Wizards of Once. I thought, as I mentioned earlier, how am I going to create a world that I fall in love with as much as How to Train Your Dragon? And that was a big anxiety with Wizards of Once. But then you see, it's a bit like having another baby. You know, when you have a second baby, and you think, how am I going to love it as much as the first? But
and you do.
I did. And so I feel slightly less anxious than I did the first time round. Because the first time around, there was a lot of anxiety. Oh my goodness, can I find another world and characters that I mind about? Because I think with a book, you know, if other people are going to fall in love with it, you have to put so much of yourself into it, emotionally, as well as writing a great plot and an exciting, you know, something that children really want to read. So you really have to fall in love with those characters and that world. So I feel satisfaction that I think, anyway, it may sound very conceited, I think it's a brilliant ending. Sorry.
It certainly sounds it.
Sorry. To Wizards of Once, Never and Forever. So I'm really satisfied about that and excited for people to find out who the narrator is. But also, yeah, I am beginning to think about that new world, and there's a bit of anxiety, like you start anything new, like children starting new school, or, you know, it's exciting, but it's also, oh my goodness, a bit scary. So I'm at that stage. That's the stage I'm at right now.
Oh, that's exciting.
I'm doing loads of publicity for Wizards of Once, Never and Forever, so it's a bit crazy. When I'm not doing that, I'm running into the shed and trying to the new world.
Speaking of your shed,
yes.
I would love to know a bit of I love hearing about writers' writing process, because I feel like you so often hear these great stories of little idiosyncrasies that authors have and how they prefer to write, or when they prefer to write, or what their habits are. And you mentioned tantalizingly before we started recording that you have so that's where the magic happens.
Magic happens. I mean, I live in London, and in the centre of the city, but we have a small garden, and my I would like to say this actually all happened by accident. I had little children, and I was making a big mess in the house. And my husband's quite a tidy person, and I'm quite an untidy person. So it was his idea. The shed was actually his idea. I didn't think, because I know quite a lot of writers have sheds, and I can see why now. But so that was really the reason, was that I was making too much mess in the house. But actually, it was one of the best things that happened. So it was a bit like, it was an accident, but like a lot of good things. But it was just great, because I had these little children, and little children, obviously, you know, if you have, they always want to be with you. But it was a separation. It was a very short walk to the bottom of my garden. You know, that was doing her work. So it was easier for them as well. Interrupted by the phone or the internet, and suddenly, and at the bottom of this garden, even though it's in London, I'm surrounded by green. It's almost like I'm just completely surrounded by trees and just, yeah, and so I'm in my own world there. And so that's and I put up lots of pictures of maps and the places that inspired How to Train Your Dragon and Wizards Once, which are mostly, interestingly, town places. So that's been so important, that having that little, and it's small, absolutely, where the magic happens. And because so often, and for me, because I had little children, I couldn't just wait for strike, because that's not really, it's off to school and you just have to write, that you had this time, you had that 9 to when they got out of school. So I've had to be quite disciplined. So having the shed has been fantastic. Interrupted by the telephone, or
Suppose you started writing the How to Train Your Dragon series when your kids were little, and then finished. What year was it that it finished? Was it 2018 was the last?
Yes, okay. So 2003 when the first one came out, but I'd been writing them for longer than that, because the first one I couldn't take. So 2003, I think the last one was about 2018, 2015.
15, gosh.
It feels like yesterday. 2015, that was the last one. And then I think...
So that would mean at some golden point there, your kids would have been coinciding with your readership age, right? For a few years there, they would have been...
absolutely, yeah. And I to them, although Maisie, the eldest, was a baby when I started writing How to Train Your Dragon, there was always a moment when I was reading it with them, and my youngest, Zanny, always insisted on speaking the voice of Toothless. So I would read everything else, because I write the books to be read aloud. That's the other thing. Because getting children to read is so important, and there's so for the joy of it. I'm all about reading for the joy of it. And reading, and children are often so smart, but they're smarter than their reading ability allows them to access often, whereas films and telly are just beamed in magically. So, they're often so clever, but it's very frustrating for them, because they're for the stories that they can actually read. You see what I mean? But so even if they don't have a learning difficulty like dyslexia, which I'm so sympathetic to children who are dyslexic. So that's why I write them to be read aloud, so that, and it's also, if they're read aloud by a parent, that's the parent and the child are enjoying it together. So I read aloud to my children, and Zanny put on the voice of Toothless. And so that was really lovely, because you get the direct response, you could see whether they're laughing at the joke that you made, and I felt really guilty when I made him cry. Some of the books, I like books that make you laugh and make you cry and make you think, and I feel really bad. Oh dear. But I've moved him, and as I said earlier, the world can sometimes be sad, but I try and give children the tools to deal with that, to deal with, sadness. I try and, give them wisdom, so it was lovely reading it with them. And Wizards of Once, when I started writing Wizards of Once, Zanny was my youngest son. His name starts with an X, like Czar's, and Czar and Wish were 13, and he was 13.
Oh, that's so good.
So there's a lot of personal stuff that goes in without you even realizing.
I'm struck by that, actually, because listening to you talk about wanting to, infuse the book with wisdom and having, not just adventure, but also like rich emotions, happiness and wonder, and also, a bit of sadness and stuff. That is what I think makes people love your books. And I think that's so important in children's books. And it's not, just as all things, it's not always the case that you find it. But this is a roundabout question, but I wanted to know, do people often ask you why you write for kids? Because I find my job is working with kids' books. And often people will say to me, do you ever get bored of the kids' books and want to do something else? And I find that question baffling, because to me, I wouldn't want to do this job in any other category. I find kids' books so vital and inspiring, and it just makes my job so fun that it's always about kids' books. So I guess I wanted to, I guess in a roundabout way, I'm asking you why you write for children, but I'm also asking, why do you think that, do you get asked that a lot, and do you find it as baffling as I do? Like, why don't people ask adult writers why they haven't written for children? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. Yes, I think that's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, so absolutely, because I'm trying to teach children to be resilient, so that's why I put the emotions in. And I think it's really interesting how people ask that question. I think it's partly because often we don't value children enough, or we underestimate them.
Yes, I think so too.
Because what I find in writing for children is that children are interested in the truly important things in life. And sometimes as adults, we can lose that sense. So children are interested. There's nothing that you can't write about for children that, they're interested in heroism. They're interested in what kind of a hero you should be. What's your responsibility to your tribe? They're interested in, I'm writing about bullying. I'm writing about politics, actually. I'm writing about, yes, what kind of a leader do we want Hiccup to be, or Tsar to be, and what kind of a leader do those tribes deserve? Wish's mother, Sycorax, is leading the tribe in a difficult direction in the wrong. So these are complex grown-up themes for children. So children, you don't need to dumb down for children, and sometimes they have a stronger sense of the important things than adults do, as I say. And that's a theme in my books. How much the adults have to learn from children's instinctive understanding. The important things are looking after each other and looking after the planet. I mean, I go and give talks, one of the big themes in How to Train Your Dragon and Wizards of Once is environment, looking after the environment. And I go into schools and I say, so who is currently leading the world in thinking about our responsibility to the planet? Is it an adult or is it a child? And they all put their arms up and they say, Greta Thunberg. And it is. It's Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
These are, so from being a mother, I have learned a lot from being a mother, from my own children, what they consider to be important. Love, family, planet, looking after the world. So I think that's one of the reasons that I write for children. And I'm not actually just writing for children, because I've told you how I write for the books to be read aloud. So some books are just written just for children, and there's a real place for that as well, because children need to learn to read for the joy of it. And my children learnt to read on some books that I wasn't reading aloud to them. They were on their own with some of these books. But there was a real place for those books because the children love them. But I write these books to be read aloud, so I am writing for an adult audience as well. And I get a lot of, because I'm wanting parents or teachers to be reading aloud to their kids. So I write them to work on two levels, a bit like the movies work on two levels. Like How to Train Your Dragon movies are deliberately, because you can't send a kid into a movie on their own. The adults are always there. So my books are written to be enjoyed on two levels. So I'm definitely writing for an adult audience as well. And there's an adult story in Wizards of Once as well. Sycorax and Encanto have to decide what kind of parents they want to be, and what kind of so, and there's a sort of love story between them as well, which adults are. So I am writing for adults as well. So that's two answers. The third answer is that I think it is absolutely crucial that we get kids reading. I love films and television, and I love particularly the films that have been made out of my books. And, you know, I watch loads of films and telly myself, but books are something special, and they are a medium we cannot lose. We have to fight to keep. And I guess it's the words. You know, films and telly are wonderful mediums, but they you know, they're not necessarily, you know, they're visual mediums. They're beautiful music. I mean, it's with a book, you have words, and words are the pathway of thought. The more words a kid has, the more intelligent and more creative their thoughts can be. And we're going to need, and empathy, that's another thing that books are very good at. You know, a film happens out there. In a book, it's like it's happening inside your head. You are that person, so it's great at creating. We need children of the future to be more intelligent, more creative, and more empathetic than ever. So books are a medium we cannot lose. So I'm partly writing for the joy of story making, and, you know, in words and pictures, but I'm also writing because I need books to survive. We all need books to survive. And they are, you know, under a lot of pressure. So I think what we're doing is incredibly important. Everybody in the book world, all that we're doing, that's one of the other marvelous things about writing for the children's book world, is that everybody is fighting for this thing that we know is precious. Teachers, librarians, booksellers, not just authors and illustrators, you know, publicists, everybody is fighting for this thing that we know in our heart of hearts is really precious and we cannot lose. Yeah.
I feel like applauding after that wonderful answer. My heart is soaring. This is the feeling I get reading your books. That was such an amazing answer. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, absolute pleasure. It's why I'm doing why you're doing what you're doing.
Did you always know that you wanted to be an author? Like, if you could go back in time to young Cressida and say, guess what? I become a beloved international best-selling author. Would she have been shocked by that? Or yes. Would she have been like, that sounds about right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I just don't know what I would have made of that, because because I was a child who made up stories the whole time. I made up stories. I was very imaginative. I was very dreamy, read constantly. But I had terribly messy handwriting, and I was profoundly disorganized. And so I was in trouble a lot the whole time at school. And although I didn't have dyslexia, I really empathized, because I was in trouble so much because of my disorganization, my messy handwriting, and all of this kind of thing. So I think somewhere, you know, children, it's so easy for them to think this. They think, oh, being a writer is about the neat handwriting, about the spelling, about all of those kind of things. And so I go a lot into school saying, actually, at the end of the day, it's about your ideas. You know, and I don't want a kid who, like me, I think, you know, somewhere I thought, well, I won't be a writer because I'm not, you know, tidy enough.
My handwriting's too messy.
Yes, exactly. And you think that's children wouldn't, you know, would know it's not, you know, but you have to, you know, children think things without you realizing they compare themselves all the time to other children in the class with neater handwriting or kind of who read more quickly. It's not a race. I keep going into schools and saying it's not a race. So I think I'd have been surprised on that count. And also, I suppose I didn't, because I was in trouble a lot, I did suffer with confidence, you know, at school, you know, so I would have been very surprised to see myself doing so. And also I had my own father was very successful in a different kind of a way. And that, you know, he was a businessman and he was an environmentalist, and it's tricky for children growing up with a very successful parent so in another field, because you sort of think that that's what you ought to be doing. You ought to be a business person. I thought that's what people ought to be, or and I couldn't, you know, I couldn't see myself being that at all. So it was a confidence building thing, and I put a lot of that into Hiccup. You know, I wasn't at all like my father. My skill set was very different. You know, there was nobody in my family who was a writer. I mean, they were all business people or politicians or, you know, things like that. So I put a lot of that into Hiccup. You know, he has to find his own way. He's got his own skills. You know, he's creative. You know, he's an inventor. Whereas his father is very much more about, you know, the old-fashioned idea of what a leader is. Yeah, I'd have been surprised. But isn't that lovely? Isn't it lovely?
Yeah.
That can happen.
You said you read a lot as a child. I'm going to ask you a question that I actually hate when people ask me this. So if you don't want to answer it, just say pass.
No.
Because I feel like whenever someone asks me like this, every book I've ever read flies out of my head and I can't remember anything. But I just wanted to ask what some of your favourite books might have been as a young reader that inspired you.
I read a lot, and it was partly because, okay, this is always sounds like I'm making it up, but I think people find it interesting. Although I also grew up in London, in a house which really didn't even have any garden. My dad was an environmentalist. So, I mean, and actually I read a lot because the house didn't have a garden, because it was very urban. But also my dad was an environmentalist. So he was chairman of the RSPB, which Royal Society for Protection of Birds. So it looked after birds, and he was chairman of Kew Gardens, looked after plants after he retired. So what that meant was his heart was in the wilderness. So every year from when I was a baby, we'd be taken to this uninhabited island off the west coast of Scotland. We'd be dropped off by a local boatman and picked up again 2 weeks later. Nothing on the island, no houses, no electricity, no mobile phones back in the 1970s. So absolutely no way of contacting the outside world if something went wrong. This is the Isle of Burke. This is the Isle of Burke, really. And that part of Scotland was the first place that the Vikings came to when they invaded Great Britain. It was the last place they left. So real Vikings lived on that island once upon a time. I know. So and Vikings believed that dragons really existed. They thought they were real creatures. So I started thinking, well, what if the Vikings were right? I mean, it felt like the kind of place that might have dragons in it, honestly, storm-bound. And from when I was 9, my dad had one house built on the island. It had no electricity. And then we spent the whole summer from when I was 9 on island in the middle of the ocean. In the middle of it, yeah. And he did get a boat at that, so at least then we could get off the island. But that way, and then we had to go out to sea to catch fish. And anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is, if you're spending the whole summer on an island with no television on it, you read a lot of books, because Scotland is not like Australia in the summer. It certainly is not. Scotland is pretty rainy in the summer. So I read a lot of books. I read sort of more domestic books like ballet shoes, and I don't know whether that's an Australian thing. But I also read a lot of fantasy. I adore fantasy. So Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Diana Wynne Jones. I adore Diana Wynne Jones. Oh, she's marvelous.
Love her.
So wonderful. Yeah, Howl's Moving Castle. Yeah, oh my goodness. Wizard of Earthsea, Ursula Le Guin. She was another hero of mine, Ursula Le Guin. Wizard of Earthsea. So lots of fantasy.
What a reading list.
Yes.
I was talking about Diana Wynne Jones just today, actually, because somehow I loved Howl's Moving Castle growing up, and somehow it had completely passed me by that there was a sequel to that book, The House in Many Ways. I just didn't know. I did not know that it was...
I don't think I've read that.
I'm so glad I'm not alone.
That is really interesting. I will go back and find it.
I ordered it today. As soon as I found out, I was like, well, I'm going to have to read it.
Because actually, when I was little, although I read so much, but also quite a lot of it, people didn't buy as many books when I was little. So a lot of the books that I read was from the library, So I don't think maybe the library didn't have. So a lot of the Diana Wynne Joneses I was getting out from the library. Oh my goodness, I would go back and read that. The Ogre Downstairs was the one I adored of Diana. Did you read that? I love that one.
Yeah,
The Power
her,
of Three.
her books are amazing.
Amazing. They're still amazing. They're still, The Ogre Downstairs I read to my children, all three of them adored that one. And it's wonderful when a book stands the test of time like that and you can still love it as an adult or read it aloud to your own children. But also I read a lot of adult books very young because on the island it didn't have, I ran out of the children's books.
You had to move on to adult.
Yes. So I was quite unusual in that. And I often write about heroes who are a bit different from their peer group, because I was a bit different. I mean, because as a teenager, I'd read a lot, and I hadn't heard that. So I was a bit unusual, I think, and I didn't realise that teenagers are supposed to be cool and sort of stand back. They're not supposed to bounce up saying, "Hello, I'm Cressida. Have you read the Canterbury Tales?" It's not a good opening line in teen world. So I write a lot about protagonists who are a little bit different and are struggling to fit in, because I think a lot of children in their different way,
everyone at that age is trying to figure out who they are and is kind of experiencing a lot of self-doubt and comparing themselves to others. I mean, that's true of people of any age, but I think everything's heightened when you're a little kid. So that's part of the reason your protagonists are so relatable, I think.
I think so. And I get a lot of, and that this is hugely sort of rewarding as a writer. I get a lot of letters from children or young adults even saying, because there's a lot of themes of bullying, particularly in How to Train Your Dragon, of children saying that their books have been really helpful to them.
That's
so nice. That is really rewarding. To feel that you've made a difference when a child was going through a difficult, part of their lives. So even if they're not relating to children in their peer group, in their class at the time, they can be relating to Hiccup or Wish or Zara. Zara is one of the heroes of Wisdom One, and he's a bit different. He's got an attitudinal problem. He's a bit of but that's a problem for children as well. I can relate to that. Children who are in trouble all the time. It's hard, So
I love Zara and Wish, but I think my heart is a little bit more with Wish.
Yeah.
Can't really explain why. They're both really lovable, but I don't. I just, having spoken to you about Never and Forever, now all I want to do is get my hands on it.
I think it's out soon.
How lucky I work at a bookstore. We're probably running short on time, but there was one last question I wanted to ask before we start wrapping things up. You mentioned about the How to Train Your Dragon movies, and I guess this is a twofold question. So firstly, I'd love to know what the experience is like for you having your story and your characters that you know so well reinterpreted for the screen. And then I, as an addendum question, wanted to ask if there are plans for a screen adaptation of Wizards of Once.
Yes. So I have had an extremely positive experience with How to Train Your Dragon. And that doesn't always happen. So I feel phenomenally lucky in what's happened, because I am so proud of those three movies. I just think that they are wonderful. And I think I've just been so lucky. I mean, the director, Dean Dubois, was the director of Lilo and Stitch, which was astonishingly
So
sort of
good.
unusual movie for Disney at the time. And, just incredible guy. And the producer, Bonnie Arnold, was the producer of Toy Story 1, amazing people I've been working with, and all the artists who, create the sets, Pierre-Olivier Vincent, he does all the set. They're almost like, if you go there, they're just incredibly beautiful, those movies. And the guy who designed the character, I've just been so lucky. I think they're works of art. And although they are different from the books in some ways, because they were never going to write 12 movies. So we had to, and I didn't write the books. I don't think that books should ever become like screenplays. Books are different things. So I never wrote the books intending them to be made into movies. I think that they've been true to the things that I'm trying to say. So they've got they're for movies full of wonder. They're movies that make you laugh, that make you cry, that make you think, that got all the themes about the new kind of a leader who's a creator, Hiccup, and he's not just like this macho, let's punch problems kind of a person. He's a creative kind of. So all of those themes and the environmental themes about, looking after the wild places of the world, everything is there in those movies.
Yeah.
And God, when they finish with the opening lines of How to Train Your Dragon are, there are dragons. There were dragons when I was a boy. When they got to that bit in the movie, I just in plants, because that encapsulates it anyway. So it's been a wonderful experience, and I'm very, very close to Dean and Bonnie and the people at DreamWorks, all the people who made it. I felt really part of, it's their movie, because I think that I suppose also it helped. My attitude is that these are different things, and the book world is complete in itself. It doesn't need a movie. As it happens, the movies are wonderful, and they're also great entry points for kids. I get a lot of kids who are not necessarily from book reading families, who then come in and they know it's worth their while to try a bit harder with the book, and then they love, so I'm getting, so that's fantastic as well. So for me, the How to Train Your Dragon movie experience has been pretty overwhelmingly positive as a movie.
Oh, it's so wonderful to hear you say that.
Lucky. And Wizards of Once is, as a result, although lots of people wanted to, to buy the Wizards of Once option, it's gone to DreamWorks again, because I just had such a lovely time there, wonderful time. And, it's in I don't know what they call it. I can't remember, pre-production or whatever. It takes a long time for a movie to come to the screen. It's good.
I never understand the different stages.
It's so interesting. It's an unexpected, because it was a book writer that I was going to be, and that's where I am. And but it's been really interesting seeing the process. I mean, my goodness, it's complicated. I mean, How to Train Your Dragon, they bought the rights, I think, in 2004 or something, and it didn't come to the screen until 2010. It's such a big process, and there is a certain, it's a certain magic has to happen with a wonderful movie that you realise is that. With a book, you're in control completely. It's all me. I'm doing the sets, I'm doing the voices, the acting, I'm doing everything. With a movie,
the ultimate director.
Magic, exactly. You have to have the wonderful director, you have to have the glorious performances, you have to have, those performances are just marvelous. America Ferrara, and they're all wonderful. Gerard, but they're all wonderful. All those actors, and you have to have all of them, but then you also have to have, the lighting, and everything has to be. And so it's a lot to get all that in place to make a wonderful movie. And you have to have huge amounts of, millions of dollars as well. Yes.
Not a cheap thing to
that's
do,
something,
make a
yes,
movie.
no, it's not something. It's not just somebody going into their writing shed at the bottom of their garden, you know, with their HB pencil. You know, that's my financial outlay. Nice paper and my 3B pencils and my, you know, it's a big deal. And people have to really, I mean, I've got so much admiration for people in that business. It's given me so much love is put into it that people don't really. And so now if I read a movie review, even if it's not my own movie review, and people are just dissing it and saying it's terrible, I just think you have no idea the kind of heart and the kind of thinking and the love that went into trying to make that movie. It makes you very, you know, respectful.
Emotional. Yeah. I'm really pleased to hear that there's going to be a DreamWorks adaptation. I'm a fan of your books, the How to Train Your Dragon books, but I also do really love the movies. And I've often wondered, you know, when I love anything that I love, if someone wants to retell it or remix it, I love the retelling and I love the remix. Like there's an endless amount. If I love something, I'll see it any which way someone wants to reinterpret it. I'm always there. But I wonder if it's the same always for the creator. And it seems as though in this instance, it definitely was like a joy to see it remixed.
I mean, it was a joy, but also I am aware that for lots of authors, it might not be, you know, I mean, I can imagine, because I, you know, put a lot of these are my heart projects. So I can understand if an author doesn't like it, it would be very difficult. I mean, it would be kind of heartbreaking, really hard. But, you know, I suppose, but I suppose, you know, as you say, things can be made in different ways. Maybe there can be a play that then's made, you know, I don't think it, even though it would be a huge disappointment, it doesn't threaten the book. You know, I don't.
That's right. It takes nothing from it.
I don't think it takes anything from it. I don't. If I see a bad movie adaptation of something, I don't then think, oh, the book isn't any good. You know, Pride and Prejudice, must be rubbish. Just because somebody did a bad one. So, you know, but I think it is difficult it must be, I really feel for authors. And also for the movie makers who, I think sometimes things, you know, as I say, this magic has to happen. And sometimes it just doesn't quite, you know, things just don't quite together. I think there is from when you read up about movies, there is a sort of something when people write about, I remember people writing about Star Wars. And when they were in it, the actors were thinking, this is going to be rubbish.
They were in the eye of the
suddenly,
storm.
Exactly. And because they hadn't seen it, you know, they were just talking to Chewbacca, you know, it's like I was saying, this is going to be silly. But actually, when it was out there with the music and you know, I remember seeing that for the first time in the cinema when I was I can't remember, I was little, and it was, wow, in a country, in a sort of place far, far away. I don't know, it was amazing. So, or even Casablanca, I think they didn't realise they were making it up as they went along. They didn't realise how good it was going to be. So
there's something a bit magical that goes along with the hard work. I think it's a combination. You can work really, really hard on something and maybe it doesn't come together, but when it does, there's some magic there. Yeah. And I think everything I've ever read of yours has that magic at its heart. I think that's why your stories are so loved. And it's why I can't wait to know what you're going to do next. I'm
Me too.
Very excited for the next thing. Yeah. But I've taken so much of your time, and so I will let you go. But I just wanted to say it has been delightful talking to you, Cressida, and thank you so much.
Well, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you too. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy Wizards of Once, Never and Forever as much as I enjoyed writing it.
I have little doubt that I will, and I know I will. And For all the people listening, you can get Never and Forever, book 4, and the final book in the Wizards of Once series, and all of Cressida's amazing backlist from your local bookstore or online at Booktopia.
Thank you for listening to the Booktopia podcast channel. Don't forget, you can subscribe to us on SoundCloud and iTunes for free and get access to hundreds of author discussions, book analysis pieces and more. Or, if your eyes need a workout, head to Booktopia TV on YouTube. Don't forget, for all books featured in this podcast and for access to a whole bunch of other fun content on our blog, head to Booktopia, Australia's local bookstore, at booktopia.com.au.